Now let's get to Tom Nicholas's Jhonny Harris video, a story of YouTube propaganda.
This is a story about YouTube, journalism, and what I think it's only right to describe as propaganda. It takes place at the unlikely meeting point between traditional news reporting, the influencer economy, and a multi-million-dollar campaigning organization which exists to advocate for the interests of the largest corporations in the world. And it all centers on one of YouTube's rising stars of 2020, Jhonny Harris.
You might want to remind Clip Channels that this guy hates React videos. No, I talked to Tom. He said he has openly talked about how if it's like if it's an older video that I'm reacting to, I talked to Tom privately. You guys are not correct on this. We've like literally tried to figure out if it has a negative impact if I react and then like a Clip Channel uploads it. If it's a video that just came out, but he doesn't have an issue with like reacts in general at all, and he doesn't even have an issue with uploads at all. He said that that he thinks it might have a positive impact if it's reacted to and re-uploaded even. If it's an older video, especially, but if it's a new video that they just uploaded, it might have the capacity to push him off the algo. This is a 2-year-old video. He won't.
I'm a journalist. At least that's what I think I am.
So a few months ago, I was sat on my sofa, mindlessly scrolling the homepage of the YouTube app, when something increasingly rare happened. The all-powerful algorithm served up a video that I was genuinely interested in. The video was by a creator named Jhonny Harris, who, by all accounts, has had a pretty good year on the platform. Until 2020, Harris was a video journalist for Vox, where he created the much-celebrated and Emmy-nominated series Borders. That year, after 4 seasons, Vox made the surprising decision to cancel Borders, and Harris left the company to strike out on his own as an independent creator. He has remained prolific, combining making casual lifestyle content with continuing to produce
some of his best work, by the way. Some of Jhonny Harris's best work is his casual lifestyle content. That's how we first got introduced to Jhonny Harris. If you guys remember when he was talking about how he was welcoming different cultures into his own home, a meme that has had permanence in this community at least, where we welcome Jhonny Harris into our homes every time he makes a new video. Or the shampoo one was great too. He don't wash his goddamn hair. Like really good shit.
Highly polished, broadly geography-themed reportage/explainer videos. The video of Harris's I was recommended is called I'm a Journalist Who Hates the News, and is a really interesting watch. There is a lot of critique, complaint, and outright conspiracist discussion about the mainstream media on YouTube, but there's something relatively unique about hearing the perspective of a professional journalist on the current state of the press. Harris themes his critique of the news, in particular television news, around 3 headers. But they all coalesce around the same notion, that the contemporary media puts too much emphasis on making its reporting exciting, entertaining, or otherwise emotive in ways which actually leave us less informed about the world around us than we would be without it. Now, I really enjoyed that video, just as I've enjoyed a lot of Harris's work. A month or so later, however, I was recommended another video from his channel, which was frankly alarming. And not so much for what was said, although that wasn't great either, but for the behind-the-scenes reasons for why it was said, and the exchange of, even if not money, access and support which brought it into existence. This second video not only changed my perspective on some of Harris's other work, but also provoked some alarming questions about the future of independent journalism, in cases where, as with Harris, that journalism comes into contact with the so-called influencer economy. For it raised the prospect of a new kind of influencer brand deal, made all the more worrisome when that creator presents themselves as a journalist, where, unlike the plugs for, say, the fantastic VPN services of Surfshark that have become a mainstay of platforms such as YouTube, the creator is not paid simply to sell a product or service. It gives over creative control of their platform to those seeking to sell an idea. The video of Harris's that provoked these concerns is titled How China Became So Powerful. For the first minute or so, it seems to be a fairly standard Jhonny Harris video. An engagingly written, gorgeously edited attempt to demystify a country which most people in the English-speaking world know shamefully little about. Things take a slight turn around the 90-second mark when, in an effort to try and add some global context to his discussion of China, Harris evidences a pretty threadbare understanding of post-Second World War politics and economics. Yet, it's around the 7-minute mark when things become bizarre. At this point, Harris stops talking about China almost entirely, and
starts telling you that at the top of the hour there's a 3-minute ad break, which is really weird. Like, that's my thing, you know what I mean? Turns out he's not even a CIA asset, he's a Hasanabi asset, you know, serving you top of the hour ad breaks. Perfectly peppered in. Here's a 3-minute ad break now.
Instead embarks upon a polemic about the state of contemporary capitalism. Drawing on a couple of graphs, he argues that what he calls shareholder capitalism
Naruto version. Thank you for the 5 gifted.
Has led to massive inequality, both globally and within individual nations. He also charges shareholder capitalism with having put the very planet we live on in jeopardy through its preference for increasing profits over reducing CO2 emissions. And of course, thus far, he's right. The truly odd moment comes when he begins to offer us a solution to these crises. Does the route to addressing inequality and the climate emergency lie in moving away from this evidently and existentially destructive system? No, he sarcastically laughs that idea off pretty quickly. The solution, according to Harris, lies in a subtle shifting away from what he calls shareholder capitalism and towards something he...
This was his most offensive. Shit. This was when, like, the Wall Street Journal, or not Wall Street Journal, they're too far right for that, but the New York Times was, like, writing where there was like an open letter from like 1,000 CEOs. No, the solution to capitalism is stakeholder capitalism. That was like one of my first videos where I was like, what the fuck is going on here, you know? I mean, dude, even just the Communist Manifesto, you don't have to read Das Kapital, just like a little bit, just a crumb of analysis from leftist theory, just a little bit of dialectical materialism, please, for the love of Christ. Just a little bit. Fuck it. Yeah, just read Adam Smith. Fuck it. Just read Adam Smith. It's just the relation laborers have with the means of production and the inherent internal contradictions that exist under capitalism is not prescriptive by Marx. It's descriptive. Okay? He is just describing what is going on. And it's the truth. That's it. Is what's happening. You can also observe those contradictions or feel them as you exist under capitalism.
Stakeholder capitalism. An idea which he defines so loosely as to make it almost meaningless, but which broadly involves corporations taking into account the impact of their business practices on people and the planet, as well as trying to turn a profit for shareholders. In fact, Harris goes further to suggest that companies such as Walmart, Apple, and JP Morgan are already doing this. Fantastic, I guess then. Crises averted. Now, I don't have a problem with polemical YouTube videos. A good deal of my channel is comprised of such content. Yet, this is not the kind of video that Harris usually makes. During his time at Fox, he was a reporter, not an opinion writer. Outside of how China became so powerful and I'm a journalist who hates the news, Harris might point to a local...
Let's be real. Straightforward journalism also obviously has a shit ton of propaganda. It's just neoliberal propaganda, which is why you are not you're not conditioned into seeing it as propaganda, because in your mind you think propaganda is something that is like outside of the norm. So if something is just the norm, then you're like, well, I take this for granted. This is just news, straightforward, objective news coverage. It's the status quo. Of course, the status quo, especially when there is still oppression occurring, when there's still plenty of structural problems, is going to have a lot of issues you must address. If you refuse to address those issues, then you are doing propaganda for the status quo, which is still inherently harmful. For example, MLK says neutrality in the face of injustice is siding with the oppression, siding with the oppressors. And that's true. Saying everything is right during the civil rights movement and that these people should just shut the fuck up, well, that's siding with the oppressors in that situation. Saying that I can put a timeline on another man's justice, on another man's freedom, and that maybe now is not the time, is still absolutely the default position, and therefore calcifying, solidifying, legitimizing the ongoing forms of injustice at that time. I use the civil rights movement because it's one that we have basically whitewashed now, but one that we all understand was a good thing. Most people understand that it was a good thing. But just like what I talked about Jhonny Harris, openly criticizing former wars that were bad 20 years later, we rarely ever look to the civil rights movement and apply any of the lessons that we need to learn from that to today's ongoing injustices and how to fight them. Hey, Chad and Hassan, I just want to say thank you. My dog passed away today. Being here with you all is helping me get through it. I'm sorry to hear that. It gets better every single day. I know, it sucks, but sorry for your loss.
Problem in the country or region he's reporting on, but he usually steers well clear of making any pronouncements about how we can solve these problems. As vague as the notion of stakeholder capitalism might be, to hear him suddenly promoting a unified global political and economic system was, in all honesty, a bit of a shock. It just seemed out of character. At the very end of the video, however, we get an explanation for Harris's pivot to political idealist, which, for anyone who values journalism in any way, should be deeply worrying. In the final minutes, when realistically most people will have stopped watching, Harris reveals that this video was produced in partnership with an organisation called the World Economic Forum. He tells us how great the World Economic Forum is and encourages us to buy a book by their founder and current executive chairman, Klaus Schwab.
I think the funniest part about this, you're not such a bad guy like everyone says. I mean, I don't think everyone says I'm a bad guy, but thank you, I guess. People hate this guy because he's a demon, but like people on the right hate this guy for very different reasons than why people on the left hate this guy. You hate him because you think he's gonna make your kids gay or something, which is not happening. I hate him because he's not making your kids gay, okay? That's why I hate him. I'm like, make the kids gay, lizard man. What the fuck's wrong with you? You said you were going to do it. What's happening? I thought we were doing like, green energy shit. What's going on? I thought we were homifying the children and greenifying our energy industries, neither of which has happened. Fuck are you doing? Stop writing books about it, loser. Make it happen.
We'll talk in a second about what the World Economic Forum is, but in short, this is a promotional video. And not only in the sense of containing a brief plug within it, but in the sense that from beginning to end, this is an advert. It may be dressed up as essentially an independently created episode of Borders, yet this is not journalism. This is a piece of propaganda, produced in very close partnership with, in fact, as we'll see shortly, seemingly co-written by a very senior PR executive from an organisation which no journalist should be uncritically echoing the talking points of. The same guy who 2 months previously was bemoaning the state of journalism was now, even if not selling, at the very least lending his platform and journalistic reputation to exactly the kind of organisation which we expect journalists to be critical of. So, in order to get a sense of why someone who presents themselves as a journalist creating sponsored content of this kind is so worrying, I think it's useful to begin by taking a brief look at what the World Economic Forum is. For Harris describes it merely as a think tank, and its frankly quite boring name makes it sound fairly harmless, right? Well, to use the proper terminology, the World Economic Forum is an international non-governmental organisation, or NGO. What this means is that it is essentially a campaigning group, which attempts to persuade both national governments and supranational organisations such as the United Nations and the European Union to implement certain political and economic policies. Many large charities are NGOs. Alongside its direct aid and poverty relief activities, for example, the charity Oxfam also operates as an NGO which advocates for the adoption of policies which alleviate poverty and suffering. If Oxfam advocates for an end to poverty, then what does the World Economic Forum campaign for? Well, on its website, the forum describes itself, again in cryptic corporate speak, as the International Organisation for Public-Private Cooperation. Continuing that, the forum engages the foremost political, business, cultural, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. In short, it seeks to bring presidents, prime ministers, and other governmental figures together with CEOs and business leaders to encourage them to think about how they might work together to, as the forum describes it, make positive change. As the notion of stakeholder capitalism that Jhonny Harris discusses in his video suggests, the World Economic Forum tends to remain fairly vague about exactly what positive change they are working towards. We can begin to get some idea of the kind of policies that the forum might promote, however, by taking a look at how it's funded. For whilst the World Economic Forum claims to be independent, impartial, and not tied to any special interests, its annual revenue of just over $408 million as of 2020 comes mostly from the fees paid by global corporations.
You know what's really funny about it? Everybody hates the World Economic Forum, but like doesn't realize why they hate it. But they don't realize why they hate it. You hate it because it is a manifestation of capitalists getting together and acting out their class interests. That's why you fucking actually hate it. That's it. It's motherfuckers going, how do we avoid the pitchforks this year? You know what I mean? Because they're coming out this year. They're coming out next year. How do we do that? How do we keep this shit going? Ultimately, it's not necessarily a thing that needs to exist. Even without it, like, they don't need these fucking directives or anything like that, because capital owners already, like the ruling class already understands their class position, whether they personally recognize it or not, and they also engage in class solidarity all the fucking time. This in and of itself is basically a whitewashing operation of said initiatives, and in a way, it works in the exact opposite way, because right-wingers look at that and go, oh, all these guys want to do is homify us.
Such as Apple, Amazon, Google, Pfizer, Lockheed Martin, Nestle, the Coca-Cola Company, Goldman Sachs, and pretty much every other significant global company to be partners of the forum, to attend its glitzy events, and to shape the policies that it advocates for. Now, some draw on the World Economic Forum's function as essentially an advocacy and membership organisation for the richest companies in the world as the basis for highly spurious conspiracy theories. To give the most recent example of this, a key part of the World Economic Forum's activities is its organisation of the annual Davos Summit, in which billionaires, business leaders, and heads of state gather in the resort town of Davos in the Swiss Alps to discuss the future of global economics and politics. The 2021 event.
I have to say something again. Are you done eating? Aren't you done eating it? You eat a lot. Big Steph fan. After I'm done eating this chicken, I eat your mother's pussy as well. You fucking piece of shit. I eat one time throughout the day. At the same time every fucking day. Super old school Hasanabi heads will probably remember that back in like 2018, I used to talk about trying to explain capitalism from the perspective of conspiracy theories, because I've always been a fan of conspiracy theories. And one thing that I would always mention, I wonder if Little Bear could find it, was always Davos. Like these guys, these rich guys, they get together in broad daylight, not behind closed curtains and smoke-filled rooms, but in broad daylight at the Davos Summit, and they decide how to further exploit you, how to extract your surplus labor value, how to continue wars, how to do all of that. Little could I have imagined that would have turned into a fucking right-wing conspiracy theory that moved away from capitalism and instead to some other shit. These motherfuckers took the conspiracy line and just actually turned it into like a right-wing wingnut conspiracy bullshit.
Which, owing to the continuing COVID-19 pandemic, took place online and which, as we'll see, Jhonny Harris's video was produced to coincide with, saw the World Economic Forum launch an initiative which it called the Great Reset. Online conspiracy theorists soon took this foreboding title as proof that Bill Gates and the rest of the global elite were finally getting round to establishing the New World Order. The truth is more mundane. As the journalist George Monbiot put it on Twitter, the Great Reset is basically a cynical rebranding of capitalism as a force for good. For the most part, it's an attempt to convince us that the World Economic Forum and its corporate partners recognise the various economic and ecological crises which our present economic system has engendered, and to make it seem as though they're going to do something about it.
You know what's really funny about this? The reason why the World Economic Forum does shit like that is because they recognize that the contradictions are glaring, and they're worried that people are going to get fucking mad and start developing class consciousness. A good way to direct them away from it is by being like, no, it's not capitalism that's at fault. I promise you, like, capitalism will rebrand it and make it good capitalism. At the very least, get the liberal elites on board, right? Ironically, though, as you have seen from the reaction to the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, you don't even need that. You don't need to rebrand capitalism. These fucking dummies, for the most part, are like, no, we love capitalism, idiot. Please give us more of that. Don't do the like gay washing shit. Like, we just want we love capitalism. Bad stuff, we love that. Okay, give me more of that. Good stuff, fuck that. I don't want it. The inherent irony in the Great Reset is that it does not need a rebranding. Most of these dumbass liberals and all of these dumbass Republicans, conservatives, all around, they fucking love eating the capitalist propaganda anyway. They cannot see a world outside of capitalist dogma. So their efforts are in vain only because the institutions are designed to yield these outcomes anyway.
In reality, very little will actually change, at least when it comes to dealing with inequality and the climate emergency. In a recent article for The Intercept, Naomi Klein concurs, pointing out that this kind of rebranding exercise is nothing new for the forum. Since the early 2000s, the World Economic Forum, and the Davos Summit in particular, have become a platform for global corporations to feign regret about the human and environmental consequences of their business practices. They regularly invite climate and inequality activists to give them a public dressing down in front of the world's press. It was at Davos in 2019 that Greta Thunberg declared that our house is on fire.
Baba?
That same year, the Dutch journalist Rutger Bregman garnered global headlines when he implored the summit to start talking about taxes, by which he meant that the rich needed to be paying more tax and that governments needed to be cracking down on tax avoidance. Both Thunberg and Bregman's comments received solemn nods and gracious applause from Davos attendees, but led to zero material action. Davos and the World Economic Forum, then, are essentially where the richest 1% go to pretend to have a conscience. While I'm sure there's plenty of backroom wheeling and dealing which is facilitated by the World Economic Forum, in terms of its public-facing activities, it serves as a means for global corporations and the super-rich to repeatedly pretend to have seen the error of their ways and to be on the cusp of change before they go back to their boardrooms to carry on with business as usual. The World Economic Forum's...
It's a very good assessment of what the WEF is. It's completely and utterly powerless. It is, but it's completely and utterly powerless, mostly because the system already works alongside the WEF. Like, there is no reason for this kind of gathering to occur because billionaires are class conscious. They're very aware of their position in society, millionaires as well, capital owners in general. And they always engage in class solidarity. So you don't need to do extra marketing for capitalism when everybody loves it. When the plebs, when the proletariat also unironically defends it. Vociferously, as a matter of fact.
Decision to work with Jhonny Harris to create a video about how companies such as Apple and Walmart are currently enthusiastically moving away from shareholder capitalism and towards this vague notion of stakeholder capitalism is just another in a long line of examples of the forum attempting to convince us that, against all the...
Like, out of the libtards that read the New York Times article or watched the Jhonny Harris video, how many of them are like, wow, my position on Walmart surely has changed. I do genuinely believe that they are moving towards a more ethical way to do capitalism. They certainly care about their stakeholders. Zero. It don't matter. They don't care. You don't need to convince motherfuckers in general to do this shit because dumb motherfuckers are already refusing to see that. They're refusing to see the writing on the wall. They refuse to see their class position. They refuse to see the nature of their struggle and their oppression. They won't see it. And I don't even fault them for seeing it. Look at the way people talk about me, okay? Let's make this about what really matters. Me. I'm kidding, obviously. But, like, part of the reason why I have so much insane amounts of backlash that I receive on a regular fucking basis from every freak group online is partially because the immediate reaction to the things I'm saying is like, fuck you. You're telling me this stuff. I don't want to fucking believe it. You must be a hypocrite. You have a house. You have a nice house. You have a nice car. You're rich. You're rich. Well, fuck you. Why are you telling me that, rich guy? I hate rich people. But also simultaneously, I'm defending the system that has designed rich people to basically extract all surplus labor value while I sit there and wonder why I can't pay fucking rent and my student loans. They don't get it. When you come in here and you're like, well, you're a rich guy. Fuck you. Why are you talking shit about capitalism? What you don't realize is you're defending more rich guys. You're defending all the rich guys. Okay? That's what you're doing. And I do not fault you for getting this mad because it's not something that you're used to. It's something that you've been conditioned by the Matrix, if you will, into believing your whole life.
Evidence they are even remotely concerned about anything other than profit. For the purposes of today's video, however, I'm not overly interested in the specific claims that Harris makes and how China became so powerful. Instead, I'm interested in the partnership between Harris and the World Economic Forum that led to him making those claims in the first place, and the warning that it represents about the growing trend of governments and advocacy organisations such as the World Economic Forum using YouTube and YouTube creators to spread propaganda and disinformation, and why we should be particularly worried about this trend in instances where those creators purport to be journalists.
I found it, I think. Like, there's different, like, gatherings and shit, but most of it's in front of us, like the Davos Summit or the Aspen Summit or G10, where all of these wealthy people literally congregate, get together, and talk about how they're going to implement changes in society that still solidify their position. It's not that fucking crazy.
Is that this knowledge help Gabe in some way, and it doesn't.
I mean, this is like, I've said it much, even way before that, but yeah, there it is. Bought from 21st of October, 2019.
So this video isn't propaganda, but this portion of it has been sponsored by the fantastic VPN services of Surfshark. Protect yourself online by heading over to surfshark.deals/TomNicholas to get 83% off a 2-year plan and an extra 3 months for free, allowing you to securely and privately browse the web for just $2.21 a month. Whether you're a journalist, surfshark.deals.
Skipping this, but here, the link probably doesn't even work anymore because it's fucking 2 years old.
/TomNicholas. Thanks again to Surfshark for sponsoring this bit of today's video. Now, on with the show. Earlier in this video, I suggested that the reason that Harris's How China Became So Powerful video was so worrying was because, in addition to the fact that Harris is presenting himself as a journalist, the relationship between Harris and the World Economic Forum appeared to go much deeper than the kind of relationship which underlies most of the other brand deals, ad placements, and shout-outs that you're likely used to seeing on YouTube. Whilst it might seem like a bit of a digression then, I think in order to explain this fully, it's useful to give a very brief sense of how such sponsorships tend to work. Now, there are many ways in which companies work with creators on this and other social media platforms to promote, usually, products and services. If you want a more complete overview, I'd suggest checking out Tom Scott's video about influencers and product placement. Generally speaking, however, there are two main types of paid brand deal on YouTube. The terminology varies, but the first is what, for today's purposes, we'll call an integration. This entails a creator making a video in almost exactly the way they would if it wasn't sponsored. The only difference is that
I'm giving you clarification about skipping ads because I want to cover my bases, even though I'm not even skipping the ad. I'm still showing the link. I want to cover my bases because there's a lot of people who don't actually watch the stream, who will never actually watch the stream, who then get up in arms, even if the creator himself has no issue with it. And I just want to make sure that I'm covering all my bases. If someone tries to fucking clip this shit, then you can always use the full adequate clip in context.
a company will pay them to, at some point, segue into a usually relatively distinct section in which they tell you about the product or services sold by that company, much like I did earlier in this video with the Surfshark spot. The creator will normally encourage you to use a discount code or follow an affiliate link, again, just like I did, which helps the company sponsoring the video to get a sense of whether it's worth them sponsoring more videos by that creator in the future. After this, the creator will then, in most cases, segue back into the main topic of their video. An integration of this kind, then, is essentially an ad break. Companies will normally be keen to advertise in videos about topics relevant to their product or service, and will often have other topics that they'll avoid. They'll also give the creator some bullet points regarding the particular features of the product or service they sell, which they'd particularly like the creator to highlight within the integration section. Outside of this, however, creative control over the wider video is entirely in the hands of the creator. Whilst there are higher level ways in which the prospect of scoring a sponsorship might encourage creators to cover certain topics and to avoid others which are more complex than we've got time to get into today, the company generally has no say in the content of the wider video. The second type of brand deal relevant to our discussion is what we'll refer to as a sponsored post. Here, a company partners with a creator to produce a video which they otherwise probably wouldn't have made at all. In most cases, this will involve a creator making a video about a product or service the company sells and presenting it in a pretty much uncompromisingly positive light. As an example of this, we might look at this video by the channel Linus Tech Tips, in which the host, Linus, tells us how all your computer backing up needs can be solved by purchasing a device by a particular company. Where an integration essentially involves the insertion of an ad break in a video, a sponsored post is basically an advert in its entirety. From beginning to end, the whole purpose
What did he know? This is a video from 2 years ago.
of the video is to sell a particular product or service. Alongside the fact that the creator usually wouldn't have made the video at all if they hadn't been paid to, the key difference here is that the company paying for the video has significant creative control over the final product. Whilst they'll normally rely on the creator to write, film, and edit the video, they might ask for a section to be taken out, or for something to be added, in order to ensure it achieves their objective of presenting their company, product, or service in the best light. Now, in my experience, people are generally more amenable to integrations than they are to wholly sponsored posts. At least, I hope so, given that this video contains an integration. I know that as a medium-sized creator whose income through the automated ads on YouTube can vary wildly.
You didn't talk about LTT? I did. Didn't I? I covered it briefly. Brahma Frog's mad you didn't cover it for 6 hours? Yeah.
Integration deals can make
It's like funny because it was happening in between like Donald Trump being literally fucking arrested and shit. So yeah, I'm sorry. Like I briefly brought it up, but didn't pay any additional coverage to it because, you know, more significant things in the world were happening.
Make a big difference in providing some kind of financial stability to my life. This is the same for a lot of creators, and I like to think that viewers understand this. When it comes to wholly sponsored posts, however, I think people are rightly more skeptical. However upfront a creator is about the sponsoring company's involvement, it's hard to eradicate the aura of insincerity, and the notion that the scales have shifted from a creator using a brand deal to better enable them to create content for their audience, to using their audience to allow them to get a brand deal with a company. Given how focused we've been on the selling of products or services in this section, it might seem to not be all that relevant to the case of Jhonny Harris and the World Economic Forum. But this issue of control over the content of a video, or indeed a written article or any other kind of content, only becomes more important when it comes to that which is presented as journalism. So to return to Jhonny Harris, we don't know what kind of arrangement existed between Harris and the World Economic Forum. In his brief acknowledgement of the forum's involvement in the video at the very end of how China became so powerful, Harris initially suggests that they merely provided him with the graphs which he uses to illustrate some of his points. Although both graphs are freely and widely
I wish the CCP would sponsor me for when I talk about the CCP.
available on the internet. He later describes the video as having been produced in partnership with the forum. It's all very vague.
The problem is, much like Starfield and Bethesda or Elden Ring with From Software, companies know who the fans are who are going to play their game unconditionally, so they don't give money to those fans to play the fucking games unconditionally. You know what I'm saying? It's like motherfuckers are out there. They're like, if I'm the CCP, propaganda czar or whatever, I'm looking at this guy. I'm like, this fucking white monkey loves us. I ain't giving him a single fucking yen, lira, dollar, whatever kind of BRICS currency that we're cooking up, okay? He's doing it for free.
Now, it's entirely possible that Harris's partnership with the World Economic Forum didn't involve the exchange of a single penny. Perhaps the allure of working with such a large and influential organisation was enough. Yet, I think the most important takeaway from our discussion of the differing forms of relationship between companies and influencers is not that money exchanges hands or how much, but this issue of control over the content. And this is where things get interesting. See, not only did the release of how China became so powerful coincide with the 2021 Davos Agenda meeting, but an alternative text version of the script for that video was included as part of a series of blog posts published on the World Economic Forum's website, which served as provocations for the wider event. The blog post is shorter than the video and is worded differently, but has the same structure, references the same events, draws on the same datasets, and makes all of the same points. The video, which Harris released on YouTube, is also embedded within the blog. What's particularly interesting is that here, it is not only Harris who appears as the author of the piece. In fact, he's only listed as the second author. The other author, who gets top billing, is Peter Van Ham, the head of communications for the World Economic Forum's chairman's office, and who, as a side note, co-wrote the book on stakeholder capitalism by the World Economic Forum's executive chairman Klaus Schwab, which Harris recommends at the end of how China became so powerful. Harris's video then was not only influenced by the talking points of the World Economic Forum, and was not only produced in partnership with them, but was seemingly co-written
I did not know this.
by one of the organisation's most senior PR executives. In the previous section,
insane.
we looked at the fairly routine practice of creators on YouTube and other social media sites handing over their platforms and reputations to companies to create whole posts which present that company's products in an uncompromisingly flattering light. And there's obviously questions to be asked about the ethics of such deals. But this, to my mind, is far more worrying. Here we have an influencer who presents themselves as a journalist, shaping their work to meet the agenda of a campaigning organisation which seeks to encourage us to view the world from a certain perspective. The perspective of the largest corporations on the globe. For, to stress the point, this is not journalism. This is a piece of promotional content seemingly co-written by a PR executive, produced as part of a much larger PR campaign which wrapped around the 2021
Lily Singh. Lily Singh presents the Davos agenda at the World Economic Forum. Dude, how come I never get invited to this shit, dog? Like, what's happening? Carlos, whatever, Klaus, whatever your fucking German ass name is. I'm right here, man. I'm right here. Everybody keeps saying, I love capitalism. I love dick riding capitalism. That I'm the biggest defender of capitalism. Where is my fucking dollary dues? Famously German name Carlos. Oh, I'm sorry. If you think Argentina doesn't have a fuck ton of Carlos Schwabs, I don't know what to tell you, okay?
Davos agenda meeting. See, in our contemporary moment, many young people, assessing the scale of contemporary inequality and of the climate emergency, are asking deep questions about how they want our worlds to be run. A 2019 poll found that 70% of millennials and 64% of Gen Zers in the United States, the ideological centre of contemporary capitalism, would be somewhat likely, or extremely likely, to vote for a socialist candidate for president. The World Economic Forum are more than aware of this, and of the threat that this poses to the companies which fund their activities. Their partnership with Harris, then, is essentially an attempt to use his platform and voice to connect with that demographic, in order to say, hey, fellow kids, capitalism's cool actually, and is totally going to solve all of the problems it's also causing. Coming directly from, say, Lockheed Martin or Goldman Sachs, such a statement would sound ridiculous. But place it in the mouth of a relatively young person with a hipster aesthetic, a sizable YouTube following, some ridiculously good skills on After Effects, and a reputation for high-quality journalism, and it almost sounds convincing. I do want to say that for all I've criticised Harris in this video, I don't think that all of this was necessarily a calculated, nefarious move on his part.
Yeah, here's the thing. They don't need to do that. You know what I mean? They literally just don't need to do that. I've said this a million times over, but I will repeat myself again and again and again. You cannot propaganda your way into social progress. Okay? I think that capital owners are terrified of this kind of shit for no fucking reason. The inherent contradictions are right there for everyone to see. You can, however, propagandize the cruelty and normalize it, especially when it is being reinforced by every institution that is designed to normalize the oppression and struggle that you feel under capitalism. The example I always use is birth of a nation. Birth of a nation will lead to the increase in clan activity and memberships, but there is no reverse birth of a nation. Like, there is no one movie that MLK watched and saw and was like captivated, and then he showed it to other people and they all got captivated, and then the civil rights movement happened. Okay? Propaganda only works in one direction. Propaganda cannot work in the opposing direction. I can only sit here and help you identify the contradictions, help you develop class consciousness. I can't propagandize so perfectly that you think it's cool. Because if you just think like communism or socialism is cool, then that's a fleeting thing. And maybe a lot of people come in here and they do think that, and then they see it as like an aesthetic, a vibe, and not necessarily the way things should be or the way things are. And then they move on to the next best thing. They move on from socialism, communism to whatever different political ideology they're interested in. That's why whenever you look at like Reddit PCM guys, political compass memes, subreddit enjoyers, they always, or whenever you look at like hyper online individuals, and like sometimes they'll talk about their own political journey, it jumps from like insane, it jumps from one direction to the next, back to another direction. It's basically, it's basically just not defined in any meaningful capacity, because you are just stylistically jumping from trend to trend, and not necessarily building a consistent, coherent worldview that's backed by your moral compass that that you abide by, that you believe in. You're just consuming ideology aesthetics. Exactly. But what does that mean? Why am I talking about this? Because, as Secretary of Antifa correctly pointed out, socialism is born out of the material conditions. It is not born out of watching a cool movie. So propagandizing against the cool movies coming out about socialism is unnecessary. But what the fuck do I know? Maybe the billionaires know better than I do. Maybe that's why they're fucking terrified and they're propagandizing behind it, you know? Anyway, let's continue.
One thing that is noticeable in his video about hating the news is the absence of any real acknowledgement of the issue of media ownership, and how the manner in which media companies being owned by wealthy private individuals and corporations who would very much like to stay wealthy might shape the way in which they report on the world around us. Generally speaking, most journalists are either naive about these matters or are highly hesitant to admit that how their work is funded might affect their reporting. We also have the fact that Harris is still likely trying to find his feet as an independent creator following Fox's cancellation of Borders, and on top of this, has found himself in the strange, weird position of being somewhere in between an independent journalist and a lifestyle influencer, both of which come with very different ethical codes. If Harris is sincere in his statements that he will be continuing to act as a journalist on his personal channel, however, then producing content in partnership with organisations such as the World Economic Forum should be completely beyond the pale. This is precisely the kind of institution that we need journalists to be critical of, to ask deep, probing questions about the intentions and motivations of, not to serve as mouthpieces for.
Say that left-wing propaganda is possible and effective. It's just easier to do right-wing propaganda because right-wing propaganda is all about fifis. Well, it's not just that it's all about fifis. Another thing that I talk about all the time. Right-wing propaganda also can just rest its shoulders gently on top of the already oppressive structures, because what you're doing when you're cutting reactionary propaganda is basically saying, look how good things are actually. Any kind of change away from that norm is actually bad, and you should react negatively to it. You will never be able to have the same ease when you are talking about maybe even shattering the world that people know and live in, the comfort that they feel in that existence, even if they see so much harm from it, even if they experience so much harm from it. It's much easier to take that anger and redirect it to someone that is less powerful than you. Black people, brown people, immigrants that are coming over the border, gay people, trans children. It's so much easier to take all of your anger and redirect it. It's much easier than serving a top of the hour ad break and redirecting your attention to subscribing for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. At the top of the hour, here's a 3-minute ad break. If you no longer want to see those ads, all you need to do is subscribe for $5 or for free with a Twitch Prime. Propaganda reinforcing existing structures has been the point of what Hassan has been saying. Exactly. If your job is to reinforce the things that you feel, then all you're doing is dulling people. You're telling them a sweet lullaby. That's why this is precisely what every right-wing content creator does. They basically tell you that everything that you're seeing, everything that has that is like pent up inside of you, all of your frustrations, you know, some of those frustrations are valid, but not because of the systemic causes. Instead, it's because of this other thing. It's because of this other entity that is like different and scary, maybe. Let me tell you how scary that is. Critiques against capitalism while running top of the hour ad break, explain that. I am a hypocrite and I love capitalism. Here you go. I'm a liar. A hypocrite. I love capitalism. Now, if that's the case and you hate me, shouldn't you automatically say, okay, maybe this capitalism shit sucks, is bullshit? Guy that I don't like says he loves capitalism. Maybe you hate it now. Just think about it that way. Maybe there's some point in the fact that it's difficult to propagandize empathy. No, that person's probably joking. Anyway, let's continue.
I want to close out this video by acknowledging that the vast majority of contemporary journalism relies on some form of advertising revenue. In the case of solely online outlets or independent journalists, it might be the only revenue stream, and that's unlikely to change in the near future. But again, the distinction lies in who has control over the content of the journalism itself. I think the prospect of a greater amount of proper, professional, independent journalism on YouTube and elsewhere on the web is really exciting. It has the potential to allow new voices to circumvent the rigid hierarchies and biases of legacy media and to provide new perspectives on current affairs. Yet, as we've seen, the manner in which such independent online journalism is likely to see it come into contact with the so-called influencer economy also leaves it open to distortion by bad actors. There are already many groups who use YouTube and other social media platforms as vectors of misinformation. Whole channels, such as PragerU for example, funded by billionaires who want to encourage us to see the world in a certain way, exist to this end. Yet there's also been a rise in advocacy organisations and national governments working with
I'm a high school econ teacher, and you're clearly underestimating how dumb the average person is, and this makes it impossible to identify their feelings correctly and the actual causes. Most people are too dumb to identify and or connect the dots. Yeah, I mean, but a stupid person knows when they're getting fucked over. They just don't know who's fucking them over and why. Even the dumbest person knows when they're punched in the face that their face hurts, right? It's just they don't recognize who's doing the punching. That's the issue. You know what I mean? My job is to tell you, my job is to try and show you who's punching you in the face, who actually is punching you in the face. Because the person oftentimes who's punching you in the face is then telling you that someone else is doing that. Someone else is causing you harm. Okay? What is this Hassan viewing experience? Please no debates and of comments. Why would you post?
I said Bruce Jenner when talking about what dead naming is.
Yeah. It's not that they're dumb, it's that they're conditioned to not understand abstract concepts. No, I think a lot of people are dumb too. I'm dumb. But you can be a dumb person and still at least have the self-preservation and awareness. That's all it demands. For you to engage in class solidarity, a big part of what you must do is not become a smart person, but instead become an aware person. A person who is aware of the structures that are designed to oppress them. I love when you get into those theory distillation monologues. You always tend to get very optimistic and compassionate at the end. The energy in your voice becomes calm. It's just great to see someone remembering for a moment the love they have for the world and they want and why they want a better world. Yeah, I mean, it's much better than me fucking yelling at stupid motherfuckers, for sure. I can get the dumb guy at work to agree with socialist principles as long as I don't say the right words. Yeah. I think what a lot of people hilariously get mad at me for is the hypocritical nature of me being a rich person advocating against the interests of the wealthy. Except the people that are getting mad at that aren't wealthy. They're poor. And instead of going, wait a minute, this guy who is rich is advocating against his best interest and advocating for mine, they immediately go, oh, dude, fuck this guy. He just wants me to not be as rich as he is. That's what it is. He's just like trying to stop me from being rich, which I will be one day. Okay? Nobody cares about your money. So who's punching me in the face? Who designed these structures? What do you mean, Judge Wooden? I've said this so many times over. It's the wealthy businessmen that have designed these structures. What are you talking about? It's your bosses. It's the factory owners. It's the lords that engaged in. It's the lords that amassed all of the riches. It's those who put the enclosures first. It's those who were. It's those who they hired to defend said enclosures. It's robber barons. There have been multiple different formations of this exact same structure throughout history. That's it. Are capitalist crises and worsening material conditions the only way people can arrive at class consciousness in real life as an observable trend on society, or can content on the internet make people see that too, but it wouldn't be as coherent? No, the only way that you can have, as far as I understand it, the only way that you can have a mass mobilization, a mass movement against like an entire world designed around churning out pro-capitalist propaganda, dulling you to the oppression that you face, telling you that any other alternative is significantly worse, is by worsening material conditions. There is an inherent crisis baked into the existence of capitalism due to the antagonistic nature of the two classes working against one another. Working for their best interest implies that they are working against each other's best interest. It's not left accelerationism. That's just theory. That's just how it works. What you can try and do in that process is maybe make it easier, maybe remove some of the burdens and create reforms and a structure where people can actually have a say. But it is supposed to be, it's not accelerationism, it is inevitability. Now there's two options at the end of that, okay? What I'm describing is not accelerationism. I am not an accelerationist. I'm not trying to push those contradictions into its final, into like a final explosive point. Okay? The reality is that those contradictions are inherent in society, in a capitalist society. So no matter what you do, you can try to continue a liberal capitalist nation state with welfare as a welfare state. You can try to, build your own transitional socialist state. But ultimately, no matter what happens, there's two options at the end of it. Okay? Socialism or barbarism, as people in the chat are correctly pointing to. And as it stands, if there isn't enough of an infrastructure for people to even believe they have some kind of power and solidarity, then it's barbarism. When those contradictions inevitably unfold on top of one another, and the welfare state cannot make up cannot make up and account for the problems, then there's chaos. Socialism or barbarism or fascism? Well, fascism is a barbarism that is designed. It's organized barbarism. Fascism is basically barbarism. It's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's just a more organized barbarism. Just like the internal contradictions of feudalism cause capitalism to eventually form, capitalism will cause never-ending crises until a stable social structure like socialism will form to deal with those contradictions, or we'll all die. That is historical materialism and the root of Marxism. Exactly. That's why it's funny when so many supposed Marxists and leftists are like, what you're describing is accelerationism. No, what I'm describing is just simply historical materialism, what Karl Marx has said, which I agree with. Anyway, let's continue.
Creators with pre-existing platforms to help push their agendas. Just last month, The Times, the UK one, published an article about how the Chinese government is using British YouTubers to spread pro-China propaganda for the benefit of both a domestic and international audience.
Where?
Last year...
Yo, what the fuck? Where's mine, dude? Conservative Canadian YouTuber JJ
Conservative Canadian YouTuber JJ McCulloch also reported having been approached by someone with at least some connection to the Chinese government, asking him to post a ready-made piece of pro-China propaganda. The prospect of this kind...
I fucking doubt that guy was getting pro-China propaganda. Wait, let me see the email. I'm willing to bet that was Epoch Times.
Reported having been approached by...
Just watched your videos and we thought it'd be great to place content from Franco. We wonder if you'd help us upload. Yeah, no, you want to bet that dude got Epoch Times? That's not pro China, brother. There's no shot. JJ's actually decent, not gonna lie. Says socialist comrade. Really? I don't know anything. I do not know anything about this dude other than the fact that I cannot listen to him speak. I love my Canadians. I love my Canucks. That dude, when he speaks, like I've accidentally clicked on one of his videos and holy moly, dude, his accent is insane. Like, I don't think anybody in Canada talks like that. Yes, he was approached to promote Shen Yun, I believe. Fucking told you. No shot. I know the following captions say Shen Yun,
some
but
connection to the Chinese government.
Oh, is that from his video? Their post does not tag any violence that will be protracted in the Shen Yun performance. Yeah, it was probably not pro-China. It was probably Shen Yun, Falun Gong propaganda, which is literally anti-China, or at least anti-CCP, and, you know, some of our best allies. Do you like Epoch Times? What? Guys, are you crazy? What do you mean, do I like Epoch Times? What are we talking about right now? Do you know what Epoch Times is? They're like Shen Yun, Epoch Times, all extensions of Falun Gong, which is a psychotic suicide cult, pretty much, that believes in some of the nuttiest shit you've ever heard. If you're not familiar with JJ, he tones down his conservatism online. I mean, I don't know anything about him. I just, like I said, his accent blew my mind. I just could not. I could not listen to him. He's the first time I've ever watched a video where I felt like a hint of like genuine anti-Canadian sentiment.
Government asking him to post a ready-made piece of pro-China propaganda. The prospect of this kind of brand deal style propagandizing coming into contact with those who present themselves as independent, impartial journalists, as in the case of Jhonny Harris and the World Economic Forum, is particularly worrying. While Harris did at least acknowledge the partnership at the very end of his video, I think we need to resist this kind of deal becoming a norm. For else, we risk finding ourselves in a scenario when all the potential for independent journalism on platforms such as YouTube is lost in a sea of paid-for misinformation, which looks like journalism on the surface, but in reality...
You don't feel anti-Canadian sentiment watching Jordan Peterson? Not as much as I fucking hate... Like, not as much as I get like a visceral, hateful reaction to hearing him speak. I'm telling you, I do not know anything about his politics. You want to know why I don't know anything about his politics? Because of the gut reaction that I have to like anything he says, because of the way he speaks, that it's just like I can't even register what he's saying.
...is little more than propaganda. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it's been worthy of your time. If you have found it interesting or enjoyable in any way, then I'd be hugely grateful if you'd consider sharing it with any friends.
JJ is a Fox pundit and a hyper chud. Chad is smoking something if they think he's a lib. No, Chad is just smoking on Americanism, okay? That's what they're smoking on. Let me tell you why. Because Canadian conservatives are still gay because they're Canadian. So in the eyes of an American, they still come across like a centrist liberal, maybe a little bit to the right. Unless they are just straight up fascist like Faith Goldie. You know what I mean?